Hey there, it is Renessa Boley Layne, and I want to welcome you to another conversation on creating your perfect work. We are in the middle of our Love and Work Summit, so if you have missed any part of this series, make sure you take the time to go back and catch up on all that resonates with you, because whether you're single, married, dating, coupled up, craving love, running as far away from love as you possibly can, there is something in this series for you. And in today's conversation, we are going to talk about the power of sexual energy. And I'm excited about this conversation because it just might turn your concept of sexual energy on its head. Because we are going to talk so little about the act of sex. Instead, we are going to explore how harnessing your sexual energy can create fulfillment in your relationships, in your career, in your hobby, or anything else that you have a desire to bring about in your life. So it is going to be such a fascinating conversation, and one that I think is just going to open your eyes to what possibilities that you have that you can harness, right? Just harness. And so this absolutely gorgeous, stunning, magnetic woman who is sharing the screen with me is none other than Dr. Elsbeth Meuth. Did I get your last name correct? Did I say that correctly?
Close, yes.
Okay, so Dr. Elsbeth has assisted thousands of women to create lasting intimacy and fulfilling lives and relationships. So she's been featured in Showtime's documentary series, Sexual Healing, and the Emmy Award-winning NBC show, Starting Over. She's the best-selling author of Sexual Enlightenment, endorsed by world-renowned spiritual pioneer Dr. Michael Beckwith, and she is the co-founder of the TantraNova Institute in Chicago. She has coached billionaires and innovators and power couples all over the world. She shared intimacy secrets at a global Young Presidents Organizations conference in that beautiful city of love in Paris. And she has been nominated as Changemaker at the White House sponsored 2016 United States of Women Summit in Washington, D.C. But here's what I admire most about Dr. Elsbeth, and it is simply her presence. And I'm sure that you can even see it as I speak on the screen, but she is grounded, she is rooted, she is deep, she is warm. In fact, I mean, we might rein in some of her depth in order for you to be able to just kind of wade into the waters of what she's sharing. But she's just an awesome spirit of generosity, and it's such a privilege to bring her to this audience. And I think you will learn so much from her, not just in what she says, but just in how she is. And so with that, I just want to welcome you to the show, and I'm so grateful to have you.
Oh, thank you so much, Renessa.
So we are going to, again, talk about sexual energy. Um, and again, the reason why I wanted to have this conversation is because we go into these talks with perceptions of what we think things are and what we think things mean. And sometimes our minds are blown away by what things actually are. And so give us a definition of what sexual energy actually is.
Yes, so sexual energy is life force energy. None of us would be here without that energy. We wouldn't be talking, we wouldn't be alive. So this is a very potent energy that runs through us at all times. And the way how I define sexual energy is that it equates with life force. So it shows up at different states or in different states. Like right now, most of us most likely are in a subtle state of energy where energy runs through us. Without it, we wouldn't be alive. It's subtle. And then when I walk, by Lake Michigan in the summer and the breeze touches my skin and it feels very pleasant.
Mhm.
So my energy is slightly aroused, not highly, slightly. Sense of pleasure is a slight arousal. And then, of course, all the way up to a climactic moment for the woman or for the man, an ejaculatory moment, which is high arousal. So
Mhm.
it's the same energy, just showing up at different states. So we can actually learn how to play our energy, move with that energy, like playing a flute, from subtle all the way up. And let's unfold it further.
So you talk a bit about this idea of feminine essence. So I've heard, I've read your book, I've listened to some of your thought leadership, and so oftentimes when you're talking about sexual energy, you'll equate it to lots of things, creative energy, like you use different terms for it. But one of those terms is this idea of feminine essence and a commitment to really helping women to reconnect to that feminine essence as well. How do you define feminine essence? What is that? What does it look like? What does it feel like? How does it manifest?
Mm. Yeah, in order to flow in life, which for me is success. Success comes from, or we want to have success in flow versus efforting.
Mhm.
So if I want to be in flow in doing my business, developing my business, expanding my business, be available in my family environment, have, wonderful loving relationships or beloved relationship with another, I want to be in my inner flow. And so feminine essence speaks to that one dimension, that's that one polarity that is opposed by the masculine power, we could call it. And I purposely call it feminine essence, while the feminine is incredibly strong. However, the word power is so preoccupied already with the masculine. So masculine power and the feminine essence. And we want to be in balance of that, so feminine is open, flowing, listening, playful, creative. Masculine is directional, linear, grounded, intentional. And many women, including myself, for many decades,
Yeah.
I was very much in my masculine. This is how I was driving my business. I used to be a management consultant before I moved into, creating TantraNova and working with couples and singles to actually cultivate that balance within so they can live more fully, more happily, more connected to themselves and others. So when we are lopsided, and I suppose everyone is familiar with this yin and yang side, black and the white, if I'm too much in the black side is not better or worse than the white side. It's just when we are in one side more and not connected, or in the other side as well, we really become like, we start, we are hinged.
Yeah.
And then I get out of balance. And when I'm consistently in my masculine, I come more from that pushing, that, forcing. And then when it doesn't work, I may get easily angry. That goes and it goes further out and out and out on that spectrum. The other way around, if I'm only too much in my feminine, I become like wobbly. I'm not grounded. I feel sorry for myself, and the characteristics I'm describing are not just there for women. They're there for men just as much. Just to point that out. However, what we are talking about here is awakening our feminine essence, is to return to that place where we flow, where we are open, where we can listen to ourselves, where we can listen to others, where I don't have to defend myself because I just am, And so then we come into this balance where I can be grounded and playful. I can be intentional and creative, where I can be decisive and listening simultaneously. For most of us, we need to practice that because most of us find ourselves either in one or the other camp.
Yeah. And I think for those that are listening, and I appreciate the comment, and that's the reason why we're having this conversation, because for a lot of us, there is this imbalance. You tend to be on one end or the other, depending on what industry you might, find yourself in. If you're in a male-dominated industry, for those women that are in STEM, some elements of medicine, those kinds of things where you have this perspective of I need to show up in a certain way all the time. There is this imbalance, and it permeates every area of our lives. For many of us as entrepreneurs, when we're stepping into the entrepreneurial space, there is the art of what it is that you want to bring into the world, and then there's there's this, there's the business of building the business, which is a very different craft altogether. And so in that push to put something out into the world, we can find ourselves driving, pushing, and orchestrating all these connections and so on. And so that other piece that you're talking about, the allowing, the flow, the playfulness, all of that falls by the wayside, either because we don't see that as a strength, or we don't appreciate it, or we don't honor it, or we don't see it as sacred. And then you take how we show up in the marketplace, and then you bring that into relationship. And then
Yes.
that can create all kinds of havoc if we're coming into a relationship and we're completely off balance as well. And we're not bringing that life force that is the feminine essence into that relationship. And then we wonder, why am I not working out with this partner? Or, so there's all of these elements that are coming from what you're saying. What I'm really curious, you have a fascinating story as well. Just your personal story of your growing up, your perspectives on sex, and how that was shaped, and how that shaped how you showed up both in the marketplace and in relationships early on. Can you share pieces of that with the rest of us?
Yes, so as I already mentioned, I was not a Tantra teacher my whole life.
Mm.
You may tell from my accent, I grew up in Germany and came to the United States in my late 20s. And then for doing postgraduate work in music. And then a few years later, I got my doctorate in education. And then I moved into management consulting. I really wanted to become a businesswoman. I was I like proving to myself that I can do this, and also to my dad.
Mm-hmm.
So, there came a point when I hit 50 when I noticed that the pattern I had in relationship was not going to work any longer, because it was an availability pattern. I attracted unavailable men. And while that was exciting, most of the time I was alone. And when I fell into despair and could see that if I was not going to change the trajectory, I actually would end up without lasting intimacy and love in my life. And I did not want to settle for that. I was very clear. And I said to myself, Elsbeth, whatever you need to do, go do it. And it led me to delving deeply into the meditation practice, and then studying Tantra, which is a form of yoga, the yoga of the energetic body, unlike the yoga we are familiar with here in the West, which is the yoga of the physical body. Mm-hmm. So in Tantric yoga, we get to learn to listen to how energy shows up within us as life force energy, as sexual energy, as emotional energy, as mental energy, as spiritual or consciousness energy. And in that process of studying and tapping deeper into my more vulnerable self, where I had the sense may have, laid that place that had kept me in that unavailability pattern. But as with these patterns, we know there may be something, but we don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. We cannot shift it. So for me, it was a deep dive into my subconscious through the tantric practice. And what I discovered in that was that I had distrusted men. And, if you had known me over 20 years ago, I was very charming. I invited the men and, I didn't look like a distrusting bitch. Mm-hmm. So that was something underneath in the subconscious, which is not accessible to the conscious mind. So I went to therapy around an early experience as an 18-year-old, where I was with a beloved, my first boyfriend, very wonderful relationship, and he asked me to have intercourse. I said yes, although I was not ready. I had to go to the gynecologist because it was so painful. When the bill went home to my house, my dad opened it, all hell broke loose.
Oh.
He called me a whore. The boyfriend left a few weeks later, and then totally alone, no soul to turn to. And at that moment, I decided, it's this kind of nanosecond decision, Elsbeth, men are not there for you when you really need them. And it trailed me throughout my young adult life into my adult life. And that all broke open in that discovery through the tantric healing.
Yeah.
By tapping back into this early 18-year-old experience, I could clear it, I could heal it on the cellular level. It was there. I couldn't remember that. I remembered the experience, but
right.
what I had made of it.
The agreement that you had made with that experience. Yeah.
Yes. And so that lives in our body. And so I was very blessed, that I had this opportunity. And in clearing that, what opened up was deeper trust in myself, because that usually goes first. Why did you let it happen? Why didn't you pick up? So blaming ourselves, then deeper trust in men. And then 6 months later, my husband now, my beloved, came into my life, and then I discovered he grew up in a tantric household. So we created TantraNova together. And so while it was so impactful for me, I said, okay, I want to share this with other women. And then when Freddie came into my life with couples and he shares it with men, I left consulting very, very grateful for what I learned in business.
Yeah.
That is the foundation I then could come from in building TantraNova. And so back to that coming into balance, because when you spoke about the feminine, that we think it's weak, there's also another dimension which goes even deeper, which is that we are afraid that we may lose ourselves, afraid of that we are not cared for, like
interesting
inner trust. And I'm not just talking trusting another, like a partner or business partner. I'm talking about trusting life. And for me, that was a huge turn in my life when that opened up for me, that it was not only trusting men to cultivate that, clear what was in the way, and then cultivate that. It led me to trusting life, because there I could relax. And this is parallel to trusting and letting go in the most intimate moment of orgasm, which can be quite scary. It can be blissful and wonderful, but it also, because it's like, wow, I may lose myself. I may be seen at a level which may feel very scary. So that is, and when we feel scary, there is a constriction. Constriction is the opposite of love. And this is only playing out in the personal, private life. It then plays also, because the way I am in one place in life, I'm everywhere.
Yes.
And so that influences me then also businesswoman, the way how I relate, the way how I manage, the way how I inspire people who may work with and for me. All of that. And most importantly, when we are in balance of the feminine and masculine, or the yin and yang, is that our health gets a breather. Because I'm in a driving mode, which I used to be a lot. It's very strenuous for the physical body and the emotional body. So then we may get sick, or some organ is going to collapse, or who knows what, So it has so many ramifications. And so this is why it may be curious for all listening, how that may play out in your life and what you may glean from, tuning with your life with energy and coming into balance of the feminine and masculine.
I love it. I love it. And so now, as y'all are listening, I curated this conversation because, it is so incredibly powerful. And we think about this just from the perspective of sex. And women have lots of different perceptions and perspectives that have been conditioned as it relates just to sex. But then when you think about the far-reaching impacts on all areas of our lives, our health, our sense of joy, our sense of security, our sense of flow, our sense of because it does require a tremendous amount of security just to be and to open yourself up and to be transparent, and to be playful and to be all of these different things. And so you talk about this idea of the feminine kind of being vilified. Like I've listened to other things that you have shared, and on the one hand, there's this desire for the feminine to be honored and cherished and protected, but from a social perspective, globally and otherwise, the feminine has often been attacked. And so as women, we learn to adapt in certain ways because this idea of being truly feminine is not necessarily something that's well received in the world. And so therefore, we're conditioned to not receive it as well. Can you explain some of that phenomenon? Because what I want is for people to even feel validated in the confusion of this balance, right? So share with us a little bit around kind of the whole feminine essence and how it's been vilified and all of that.
Yes. Wow, that's a big conversation. So feminine energy has been vilified for millennia. A shift has started to happen through the women's movement. Mm-hmm. And we are very much in that process and progress, mm-hmm. expanding, and then it goes back a little bit, and
Yep.
So, and it has to do with the hierarchical model, the patriarchal model, where one is up and one is down. The feminine, mm-hmm. women were down, men were up. And in that model, in any hierarchical model, the one who is at the top doesn't need to listen to the one who is at the bottom, because it's conceived that who is at the top already knows. This is how the world occurs. Yeah. Now, the curious thing is that the question I've been asking myself is, why did women stay at the bottom for so long? Now I know that it has something to do with consciousness, because in this patriarchal consciousness, everybody lives in that consciousness. Mm-hmm. So we need to shift the consciousness, or we could call it the context. Yeah. And just briefly do so, where can that lead if we don't want to live in a hierarchical model? If there was matriarchy, it would be the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's not the solution.
Men are not bad necessarily. It
has nothing to do. No, it's just like we have construed it. So, and also physical strength, when hunter and gatherers, and at some point they have made some sense. I'm not sure about that either. But so anyway, what I'm proposing and what we propose in our work is that we actually come to a horizontal model where the feminine and masculine, they are equally important yet different. Mm-hmm. And where one of us can lead at one moment while the other follows. And then the second one leads and the first follows. So you have figure 8 or the infinity loop, but that requires certain awareness and certain skills, because when we are in that model, both of us need to be able to listen, to speak up. Those are the two polarities, listening and speaking. Following and leading. Mm-hmm. if I only lead, I miss something,
Right.
and I need to be able to follow, because otherwise I just stay stuck. So historically, that is one aspect of what you called,
Yeah.
the feminine being vilified. Then let's take this into the sexual. For if we look at masculine sexual energy, it has been lauded for millennia.
Hmm.
Harems, playboys,
Hmm.
Casanova. When
Yeah.
the teenage boy comes home to his dad and had, sex for the first time, shares with
Hmm.
his dad, gives him a high five, you're a man
Yeah.
now, and here are a few rubbers. The girl, I never would have gone home to my mother and would have told her, because for a girl, it's like once she had sex, she may be considered no longer pure, no longer marriage material. Even if times have shifted somewhat, there is still that sliver of, you know, you should wait, or at least this is how I
Yeah.
was, you should wait until you're married.
Hmm.
Very different. Then also for many women, who got sexually abused,
Hmm.
either physically or, just in looks. And so we have also built this wall. Or on the other hand, then we use our seductive sexual energy to get what we want.
Right.
So it's very, to find ourselves in that, you know, forest of, whoo, is to find ourselves, the connection
Hmm.
to our own life force energy that is sexual in nature. And in my work with women on awakening the feminine essence is connecting with a beautiful sexual feminine energy so that this can flow, which also means to clear whatever wounding individually, personally, or collectively there may have been, so that this energy can get set free. Because when my sexual energy is constricted, convoluted,
Right.
because of, it was injured in some sense, then
Yes.
it's not only that it may not be available for my greatest pleasure and joy, but also it may not be available to be fully in my creative self.
Interesting.
Because once that energy is set free, cleared, that wonderful sexual creative life force energy is available to move through up into my heart, embellish my heart, my love for myself, for another, up into my third eye. Then I can use this life force creative energy to really fuel my ideas, what I want to bring forth in the world, because this
Mm-hmm.
energy not only creates new life,
Mm-hmm.
we can create our life with that energy.
Interesting. Now let's talk about that because I think this is a perfect segue. How does that manifest practically? So let's think about that in if I'm operating, because again, there is the balance, right? If I'm operating in that feminine energy, how does that manifest in the creative aspect? How does that manifest in the career? How does that manifest in bringing some big idea into the world? Like, how am I showing up? How am I being? Because I think for many of us, we don't even recognize um, whether we're operating in our feminine or not. We don't even recognize that we have access to that part of us that's actually part and parcel of our success, right? So you talk about like women being flowing and circular versus not women, the feminine being flowing and circular, and the masculine being quite linear. Well, for many women in their careers, there's a very linear perspective to how I've got to get from, this role to the next role to the next role to the next role. And there's this drive around climbing up this ladder. And yet they may miss the opportunities that really get them the fulfilling work that they're desiring and that they're born to do, because there's this linear perspective of how it has to happen. There's this rigidity there. And so it has its place, but the feminine has an openness to it such that those opportunities can present themselves in different ways, as an example. So help us understand kind of that dance, and how it shows up when it comes to creating work, when it comes to creating money, so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's so beautifully how you said that. It's really starts with listening to ourselves, creating a new awareness. Because, for example, also in the bedroom, like masturbation,
Mhm,
many of us women, when we masturbate, we are very masculine. We
mm,
go for the destination. What about tuning with myself and enjoy the journey? It is not about the destination, because that is very linear, getting
mhm,
there. And so to really explore, because then the energy, that creative energy, so sexual energy has two ingredients. One is creativity, the other one is pleasure.
mhm,
Very well designed. So we would come back to that pleasurable experience, so we would co-create on a
mhm,
biological level. So tuning with my own pleasure and remaining like hanging out in the pleasure instead of going towards this 3-second clitoral orgasm.
mhm,
I'm not saying this is bad, not at
mhm.
all. It's great.
Yep.
It's one dimension. What I
Mhm,
want to open up here is that there is much more to discover, where we then can groove in, be in the flow, be nurtured, be fueled by.
mhm,
And so just as we can bring this into our intimate life with ourselves, we can bring this into our work life.
mhm.
Because if I'm so destination oriented, goal oriented in my work life, as you already said, may miss opportunities.
Right.
The energy of openness, where we just like I call it a possibility, conversation for possibility instead of conversation for commitment.
Right.
They are distinctly different. They take place in a different mood. And in the conversation for possibility, which is a flowing mood,
Mhm,
anything
mhm.
is possible.
Right.
And that is what we want to bring into our work life, because
Mhm.
things may show up that then move with grace and ease instead of efforting towards, but this is what we set out. We're
Right.
stuck, it's not working.
Mhm. No, I love it. And my hope is as you're listening, you see the parallels, right? And I'm glad that you brought it back to sex or sexuality or sexual energy. We'll call it sexual energy, because that same juxtaposition happens. And I have so many conversations with women, as they're trying to figure out what their perfect work looks like. And they'll have an idea, and they'll say, I had this idea about X, but I'm not really sure if I should do that and if that really makes sense, and so on and so forth. And I'm a big proponent of taking inspired action. Like, they have a goal, and they have a destination. They don't know how to get there. They're so driven on how to figure out how, not realizing that, guess what, that inspired idea, there's something about that idea that is going to move you to that destination. Now, the idea might not be, it might not lead you to a straight line, but that idea is going to take you someplace that's going to shed a layer, or it's going to make a connection, or it's going to open a door, or it's going to expand your understanding in a way that you can never get to your destination had you not had this new understanding, or had you not met this specific person, or had you not gone through XYZ door, you would not have been prepared for the destination. So the inspired action is not the end game in and of itself, but it is the next step that actually gets you to the end game. But when we are so linear in that thinking, or so masculine in that space, I need to know if this is going to win. It's not about the win. It's about, what am I experiencing in this moment, trusting that somehow I'm going to get where I need to go. And so you mentioned, I think earlier in the conversation about this idea of, when you recognize it, I didn't trust men. I developed this distrust of men, but more importantly, I developed this distrust of life. I look at that as, for me, it's, do I trust God? Like, where is this trust that I'm going to be cared for, that I'm going to be nurtured, that I'm going to be cherished, that I'm going to be loved? And oftentimes we look for those things externally. I'm looking for it in my partner. Does my partner love me? Does my partner cherish me? Does my partner, or we're looking for it in the job. Does my boss value me? Does the leadership see my potential? Does the marketplace want what I have to offer? Right. And so that external validation, that's a masculine component. There's elements of that that's important, but on the feminine, there's this trust. There's an intuitiveness around that. So learning how, what if my worth and my value was completely independent of someone else's ego trip? Because everyone's on a different journey and a different path at a different time. So maybe my partner doesn't value me in the way that I should. Does that mean I'm any less valuable? And so stepping into those elements of the feminine essence allows you to be certain in the midst of uncertainties, right? And so many of the things that Dr. Elsbeth is sharing, at least I had never attributed that to sexual energy. I was like, it's valuable, I get it, but it is truly the essence of who you are. And so as this series has been all about love and work and all of those different elements, one of the biggest steps is really understanding that here internally first from within, because then you can begin to make sense of what's happening outside of you, right? Whether that's career, whether it's business, whether it's mission, whether it's love, whether it's all of those different things. But I love it. And so I recommend folks kind of, take a look into her book, Sexual Enlightenment. There's an element in that book, and we don't have time to go into it in this conversation, but there's an element in that book where it really does this juxtaposition between the feminine energy and the masculine energy. And you're able to see them side by side. And there's value in both, right? There's value in both, and we operate in both. And when we're really balanced, we learn how to do that dance seamlessly. But it would be great to take a look and say, where am I operating? Where am I playing? And how is that serving me? Am I too much in my feminine such that I'm disempowered? Or am I inhibited in my feminine such that there's this whole world of pleasure and joy in the midst of the success? And pleasure and joy is not just a sexual thing. But if we're able to have more pleasure and joy in the sexual element, imagine how much pleasure and joy you're able to have in the business, in serving clients, in the career, in the nonprofits, in the philanthropy, and all these other elements. I'm going on a soapbox here, but this is all I'm taking from your conversation, trying to bring it home. But just imagine. And so beginning to see the parallels of that, and recognizing that where I might be blocked in some area, because how I do anything is how I do everything, I might see those parallel blocks in how I'm showing up in the marketplace as well. It's a very deep conversation. It's a very intimate conversation, and it's a conversation that many of us don't even have the vocabulary to have, right? But I think it's really, really powerful. And we just scratched the surface today, but my hope is that it entices you to take a step further. Let me learn more about this. Let me investigate more about this. I encourage you, we're going to share, I'll have Dr. Elsbeth share a free gift for you so that you can actually jump into her ecosystem and follow some of her work and learn, and then and figure out, how do I integrate that into my own belief system, right? There are elements, everyone's coming with their own belief system. There's elements that you can draw in, there's elements that you may, discard, what have you, but there's something in this space that I think will break open so many people in so many ways to have greater sense of joy, pleasure, peace, success in so many of the areas that we desire to grow.
May,
So
may
go,
I
please.
give
Yes.
one example so that we can really pull, like from my own life?
Yeah.
My business and the success of my business changed fundamentally once I opened up to trusting, to tap further into my feminine, which has to do with receiving, trusting that I'm given to. You know, I remember a number of years ago, I was very curious about attraction marketing. I felt like there was something in it, but I didn't know what it meant, you know. And in the process of my own evolution, because now I am attraction marketing. It's not a doingness. I'm not saying I don't do things. It doesn't come from that place of I have to do this in order to. It comes from, okay, I'm open. This is what I would like to create, and I'm open so it can come to me.
Yeah.
It's a fundamentally different way of being in the world. And the thing is that this is not only an intellectual construct. It then lives in the body as an experience. Being afraid of death, unless I learn to be at ease with the truth of dying, which will happen to everyone. I make peace with that. I can never feel safe. And that is letting go into that.
Yeah.
That is the ultimate letting go. You know, the little go in a climax that can carry unmasking. Scary. It's that we want to tap further into that, and that is the feminine in its 10th
Yes.
so degree. And once I really cultivated that, and cultivating something like that is often a very deep personal journey, because we have to face ourselves where we had been or have been in our own way.
Yeah.
In the blind spots. So it was a deep journey. However, I have to share with you that the way I do business is very different. And I'm in a continual flow. And if you told me this 10 years ago, I would have said, oh, Renessa, you are dreaming. No, I'm an example of that possibility. And that is what I would like to open up for everyone, that there may be something for you that you may be ready for now.
Yeah. So with that, let's share with people how they can stay connected to you. So Dr. Elsbeth has provided a free gift for all listeners. And so what's great about this is that you then get to devour some of her amazing content, but more importantly, in doing that, it invites you into her ecosystem so that you can learn more, that you can, whether it's attending retreats, programs, whatever she has to offer, it gives you that opportunity to be connected to her world. So please share what you have for our audience, and then we'll make sure that people are able to get access to it through this page.
Thank you so much. So the gift is actually a DVD download, video download, called Awaken to Your Feminine Essence. And
there we go.
A couple of practices so that each of you who are here today can tap into listening to yourself on that energetic level that I spoke about, and in the process connect more with that flow that moves through you at all times. That energy is moving through you at all times. So this will give you a chance to bring this into your life. And if you like to connect with me, please do so and share your very own personal story and journey, and how I ever can support you, I'm here. And then I teach a 3-day Feminine Essence workshop here in Chicago in person, which is also accessible by Zoom. So it's a hybrid workshop. I work with women one-on-one, very customized, based on what's up for them. And then, of course, we have our co-ed workshops where Freddie and I teach together for couples and singles. So if you think, oh, then I have to be in couplehood, no. I started work as a single because I wanted to find out my blind spot in terms of that love, intimate, relational thing that was there.
See, I told y'all she was beautiful, right? I told y'all she was beautiful. So make sure you will see a link to that DVD download right at the bottom of this video. So click that link, enter your name and email address, and stay connected to Dr. Elsbeth and her work. And so with that, I want to thank you again for sharing your brilliance and your magnetism and your love with us. And on behalf of Dr. Elsbeth and myself, we wish you all well, and we'll see you the next time. Bye-bye.